afternoon. Andrew, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thanks.
That's great to know. So today we're going to be talking about your upcoming documentary called Complicated. And I gotta say, I I've seen documentaries where they talk about diseases that are uh using the word complicated or difficult to diagnose, but never I never heard that this type of disease was so difficult in like all the sense of the word. What inspired you to bring these stories to the big screen or to the streaming screens for the people?
Okay. So the title is called Complicated, and I think I'm interested in complicated issues. I'm interested, like, just personally, I'm interested in things that aren't, sort of black and white, that aren't simple. I'm interested in the nuance. I'm interested in the complexity, and so this project, this issue, is like really embodies that. And so it is a perfect title. Um, and so do you want to know a little bit about how it came about? Like, is that
Yeah, sure. Tell us how it came about, and from there we'll keep going through how you got into all of this because again, um, it's such an interesting it's an interesting topic. It is an interesting topic. All of those stories are mesmerizing in a way that you learn a lot, and two, you feel, especially myself, that I'm a dad with a 2 year old, that seeing how these parents are some of them are suffering for just people not understanding the diagnosis or the medical industry not knowing how can they make sure that, hey, yeah, this is actually real. So let's go ahead and dive into that.
okay? So, uh, uh, all right. This is basically this is a we're looking at a medical issue called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, EDS, and it's a connective tissue disease, which is in all the parts of the body. And because of that, because it's in all the different systems of the body and parts of the body, there's all sorts of different symptoms, and it tends to sort of explode in puberty or after some kind of trauma. So usually it happens in children at a certain point, and kid can be fine, then all of a sudden they're sick, and then their parents are like, what's going on? They start taking them to doctors, and there's nothing that addresses everything. Nobody can diagnose what's going on. They look fine on tests. Uh, so they're just going to doctor after doctor. At a certain point, the doctors are saying, there's nothing wrong with your kid. Maybe it's all in their head. Maybe they've got psychological problems, or they're seeking because they just say they're in pain and they want drugs. Uh, and so, the kid, they start this long process in which they're just not believed. They're not believed. Their lived experience is not believed. Then eventually they might land in a children's hospital where there's a new specialty called medical child abuse, and there's medical child abuse physicians whose job it is to find cases of medical child abuse. And this looks from the outside like medical child abuse because you've got a kid with symptoms that don't seem to make any sense. There's no clear-cut diagnosis. The parent's emotional. Of course, they're emotional because they're not getting help for their kid. They know a lot. They know a lot about medical stuff. Well, of course they do because they've been researching this for so long. Um, and then they get tagged and targeted, and referred to child protective systems. And in many cases, they're accused of harming their kid or literally abusing them, or over medicalizing at the very least. And in some cases, their kids are they lose custody of their kids. So that's kind of like what we're looking at overall. And, it took me, what, 3 minutes to sort of describe that. That's why it's complicated, because it takes a long time. And our medical system is not capable of dealing with complex issues. And our legal system is not capable of dealing with complex issues. So that's the problem right there. Cookie cutter medicine, cookie cutter law, we can even say that, and a problem that defies easy explanation. So what we're dealing with EDS is just a microcosm for a bigger problem. Like it's a bigger problem in healthcare, it's a bigger problem in child protective services, and that's what we want to address. So it's not just this niche issue, like, people say, oh, rare disease, oh, rare disease. It's not, it affects so few people that it's not important, but it does. Like, first of all, this disease is not very rare. It's not nearly as rare as we think it is. It could be 1 in 500, which is not rare at all. But it's like I said, a microcosm for other complex medical issues, and it's happening every single day. It's happening everywhere, all over the world, not just here. And we need to open eyes to it.
How challenging was it to compile all of these interviews and find these families? Because I imagine that, because I know that throughout the film we follow a family that's going through a lot of legal situations due to the legal system saying that they are abusive parents due to the child has the condition. But how challenging was it for you to find all of these stories and make sure that, not make sure, but have these families agree to tell their stories, on like that people can see their point of view?
I mean, it wasn't challenging finding families because they're out there, and you get when you're making a film like this, you connect to certain communities,
Okay.
and organizations who are dealing with the issues. So, and people tend to know each other, and they tend to they're aware of sort of the landscape, and so it wasn't too difficult finding families. It wasn't easy though getting their trust, and
Okay.
that I was not so ready for. In the past, when I've gone into communities that I've made films about, it's like they want their story to be told and they're excited. In this case, I didn't realize the repercussions of the trauma that they dealt with. The children dealing with trauma of a medical system that doesn't believe them, that says that they're faking, they don't, there's something wrong with them psychologically. Um, and parents who are scared to death that their kids are going to be taken away. So if they tell their story openly to me, that could put them in some kind of liability legally.
Hmm.
Like, so they're worried about that. So I wasn't expecting that, but it's real. It's like the trauma of these families because of the systems, because the systems can't accommodate them and can't accommodate um, the complicated nature. Uh, they're they're just really yeah, I mean, like, I think traumatized is the word, and so it wasn't easy. It wasn't gaining the trust was didn't happen immediately. It took a long time, but we filmed over a period of almost 7 years, and through that time, I think the trust was built, and that was, yes, essential, like, so that it's not just about me who is getting something from them, um, but that I was able to give them something in witnessing their story, validating their story, and bringing it to and letting it be seen, whereas it wasn't being seen. I mean, this is like what happens in the darkness, you
Hmm.
know, and that nobody knows about. So it's a great sort of vindication to be able to bring these stories to the world, and especially at Sundance, which um, uh, I think is a great venue to premiere the film.
And while I was watching the documentary, you compiled the documentary, or you made the documentary feel not only to tell a story, it's as well to educate. And the way that you use the education, at least in this documentary, but thinking about of others, you focused a lot in the interviews. You focused a lot on connecting on what one doctor says to connect it with one of the families. How challenging was that to connect all of those dots together to have this final product? Because I imagine that had to be a little bit complicated to have two ways, a way to learn and a way to as well show like this is the story of all these families and children.
I think you're talking about editing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'm talking
Okay.
about editing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, I worked with a great editor. Her name is Alex Albers.
Okay.
And a lot of the for that I'm indebted. Um, and so it's the challenge is to both tell a story, beginning, middle, and end. And there's not always a beginning, middle, and end. You might have to create the the beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
So that's an editing issue, an editing question. Sometimes it's built in, as you'll see in the film. There's several stories that have natural beginnings and endings. Um, and but it's also like, how do you create something that's educational, that tells a story, that's entertaining in a certain way, and that also makes an impact. Uh, so you're doing a lot. You're doing a lot with a documentary film, and I like to think that we have all the elements in Complicated, that it did come together that way. I think if anything, it leaned a little too far on the emotional, in the sense that it's really sad. Like ultimately, it's very sad, and people have a threshold for sadness.
Yeah, I funny story is that while I was watching it, I was actually putting my son to sleep. And for me it was a little bit difficult just to hear the parents be so sad, and being the fact that they are like it's injustice of what they're going through when their child is going through much more,
Yeah.
and wanted to ask you, while compiling all of these stories and all of these footages for 7 years, was there any moment throughout all of this filming process that you go back all the time, like a little memory that you just like keep going back to it?
Uh, okay. Well, the first thing I want to address here is
Mm-hmm.
when you talked about being a parent,
Yeah.
and I think that's the thing that is, I don't know. I don't know if that's the thing I'd go back to. Um, I'm also a parent, and the idea that like the assumptions that we have as parents is that we can that it's our job to take care of our kid, and that there's a certain sanctity to that. That like that's our job. We're going to do it. Um, you know, th- but then to realize that the state can come in at any point and pull our kid out and like say, you don't have a right. You don't have a right because you're harming your child. Um, Even if you're doing everything with the best intentions and following the orders of the doctors that you've seen, that your kid could be taken away. I mean, that's unfathomable. And so that's something that I think that every parent can relate to, that kind of injustice, and can happen in turn on a dime, like any moment.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got a complicated kid, it's even more likely that that can happen. Like it's like that's where it comes up. So that to me is like that's the sort of like central, the core, the sort of core of this for me is that everybody can identify that this could affect you too. It's not just other people, but it's everybody. Uh, so, I mean, besides that, as sort of like, what I come back to the dear um, girls that I knew that in this film and that I cared about and who aren't here anymore. Like, it's crushing. It's crushing. It was completely unexpected, and it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart, and to see the families and how it also affected the families. I don't know what more I can say. Like it's just like it's the in some cases
Yeah.
the worst outcome. And hopefully there's a silver lining in telling those stories and bringing awareness to the issue underlying them.
Is part of your goal with complicated showing the world, and not only the world, like myself, or let's say my neighbor, um but is one of your missions is like that the world can know and see that, hey, this is actually happening.
Oh yeah, I think I said that. Like absolutely. The name of my company is Open Eye Pictures. I want to open eyes, and
Okay.
I want to shine light in dark places, it's sort of a mission of mine. Um, so absolutely, that's what grabbed me in the beginning. Like I can't believe this is happening, and I want others to see what's happening. Um, because I care and I don't want it to happen. And so if there's something that I can do to show the extent of the suffering and the extent of the injustice, um, and the possibility, also the possibility for healing, I want to do that.
And is there any chance, because I did, while I was doing research um of your career, I did see that you have Under Our Skin, and then you have a second part. Is there any chance that we might see Complicated two, like a second part to undergo, like to follow up on some of these stories, or to find other stories like that people can see, like, hey, you saw this group of families, now this is the continuation of these ones that you saw probably in the first film, and now we're going to see the stories of other families as well.
I actually didn't think about it. Quite frankly, I'm, I don't know. I don't know. It could happen. I don't know if it would, I don't think it would be a continuation of these stories, but there are so many of them. So it could be very rich material to sort of like go back into. Um, but right now I'm just focused on getting this film out.
Okay. And and is there any other projects that you might be working on that you would like to uh present to us today?
No, I've just finished like in the past couple of years, I finished three films. So it's like they all sort of like came out at close to the same time. Um, I have a film that's coming out in February, just in a few days. It's going to be on PBS. It's called American Justice on Trial: People versus Newton. It's about the Huey Newton from the Black Panthers. It's about his murder trial in Oakland in 1968. Um, and sort of it shows how groundbreaking that trial was for many, many reasons. So that's coming out on TV next month on PBS. I have another film that I finished last year that premiered at Raindance Film Festival and won their Spirit of Raindance Award. It's called Dog War, And we're looking at the issue of the um, dog meat industry in Korea, following army vets who've made it their mission to save dogs throughout the world. And they go there to try to stop the system. And so that brings up issues around um, cultural imperialism and what some people might call white saviorism, and but it also looks at this just the issue of uh, um, uh, how we treat vulnerable beings and the conditions to which they live. It's also a story of suffering, and it's really hard to watch for some people. Uh, so that's another film that just came out. Uh, and after this, I'm taking a little break, and we'll see what comes next.
That's amazing. And Andrew, this would be my final question for you today. If you could describe Complicated, I know that Complicated is the title of the film, but if you could describe this film with another word, what would it be?
Uh, Clusterfuck. How's that?
I completely agree. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I'm so sorry. My son is right here next to me. But Andrew,
Sorry.
thank you so much for giving us the time to talk about Complicated. It's an amazing documentary. I hope everybody gets introduced to this situation that is going on, and as well that they learn something new, and that the people from the medical industry can learn that this is actually happening.
Yeah, yeah,
So thank you very much for your time.
yeah. Thank you, John.
Okay, bye bye.